Hong Kong, July 20th, 1973. In a private hospital room at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Bruce Lee, the greatest martial artist in history, was about to make a confession that would remain hidden for decades. The audio recording captured that day stayed sealed in a family vault for over 40 years, because those who heard his final words knew this wasn't just another deathbed conversation or peaceful goodbye. This was real. This was raw. This was Bruce Lee revealing a secret that would shatter everything the world thought they knew about him. What you're about to hear is a story that only 3 people alive today can confirm. A story about truth spoken in dying moments. A story about regret, revelation, and words that Bruce never intended for public ears. If that recording device hadn't been running that afternoon, this confession would have died with him forever. Some say it was the unburdening of guilt that had haunted him for years. Others claim it was the final act of honesty from a man who'd built his philosophy on truth. But one thing is certain. What Bruce Lee confessed in that hospital room on his final day would remain a family secret for over 4 decades. This is that story. The year was 1973, and Bruce Lee was at the pinnacle. He had conquered Hong Kong cinema with The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon. Enter the Dragon was about to make him an international superstar. He had proven his philosophy worked on screen and in life. He had achieved everything he'd dreamed about as a poor kid in Hong Kong. But success had come with a price. The price of secrets. The price of choices that haunted him. So the price of truths he'd never spoken aloud. And so Bruce found himself in Queen Elizabeth Hospital, admitted for severe headaches and seizures. The doctors were concerned but optimistic. Tests were being run, medication was being adjusted. Nobody thought this was the end. Nobody except Bruce. Linda Lee, his wife, sat beside his bed that afternoon of July 20th. She'd been there for hours, holding his hand, talking about their children Brandon and Shannon, making plans for when he'd recover and return home. But Bruce had other plans. He'd asked Linda to do something unusual, to bring the small cassette recorder from their house, the one he used to record training notes and philosophical ideas. If you're watching this story and learning about Bruce Lee's deathbed confession, the secret recording that stayed hidden in a family vault for over 40 years, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is the kind of story that reveals the truth Bruce Lee took to his grave. The confession that changes everything we thought we knew about his life and death. "Linda," Bruce said, his voice weak but clear, "I need you to record what I'm about to say." His wife looked concerned. "Bruce, you need to rest," the doctor said. "I know what the doctors said," Bruce interrupted gently. "But I can feel it, Linda. This is my last day. I know it. And there are things I need to say, things I've never told anyone, things the world needs to know, but not yet. Not until enough time has passed." Linda's hands trembled as she set up the small cassette recorder on the bedside table. She pressed record and the reels began turning, after capturing what would become the most controversial audio recording in martial arts history. The recording began with silence. Bruce gathering his thoughts, choosing his words carefully despite the pain and the medication flowing through his IV. "My name is Bruce Lee," he began, his voice carrying that familiar intensity even in weakness. "Today is July 20th, 1973. I'm in Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Hong Kong, and I'm dying. The doctors don't know it yet. Linda doesn't want to believe it. But I know my body. I know when the fight is over." He paused, breathing deeply, and Linda can be heard crying softly in the background. What I'm about to confess has haunted me for 15 years. Since 1958, since the rooftop in Hong Kong, since the fight that changed everything. The world knows about that fight. They know I fought Wong Jack Man in Oakland in 1964. They know about my challenge matches. They know the stories I've told in interviews, but they don't know the truth about Hong Kong, about what really happened on that rooftop, about what I did. Another pause. The sound of Bruce shifting in the hospital bed, wincing from pain. "In 1958, I was 18 years old," Bruce continued. "Young, arrogant, convinced I was the best fighter in Hong Kong. I'd been studying Wing Chun under Ip Man. I'd been getting into street fights, beating everyone who challenged me. I thought I was invincible. There was a fighter named Chen Hao, older than me, maybe 30, a master of Choi Li Foot who ran a school in Kowloon. I'd heard he'd been saying things about Wing Chun, about Ip Man, about me, saying we were all talk, no substance, on saying our kung fu was for demonstration, not real fighting. Bruce's breathing became more labored. Linda can be heard asking if he needs to stop, if he should rest. He insisted on continuing. I challenged him publicly, called him out in front of his students, demanded he prove his words or admit he was lying. He accepted. We agreed to fight on a rooftop in Kowloon, neutral ground, with witnesses from both schools. No rules. Fight until someone couldn't continue. The silence that followed lasted maybe 10 seconds. The only sound was the hospital equipment beeping, monitoring Bruce's failing vitals. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes, Bruce said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Chen Hao was good, really good, better than anyone I'd fought before. He hurt me, broke 2 of my ribs, split my lip, made me bleed like I'd never bled in a fight. But I was young, fast, desperate to win, and I got lucky. And if you're enjoying this confession, if you're learning secrets about Bruce Lee that were never supposed to be public, hit that like button because it helps more people discover the truth that Bruce himself wanted, hidden until after his death. I threw a ridge hand strike toward his throat, Bruce continued. It was supposed to miss, to make him flinch and create an opening for a real strike. But he moved forward at the same moment I struck, and my hand hit his throat directly. Full force. The sound on the recording changed. Bruce was crying. Actually crying. A sound his family had rarely heard. The impact crushed his trachea. He went down immediately, couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. His eyes, I'll never forget his eyes. They were terrified. He knew he was dying. His students rushed to him, tried to help him breathe. Someone ran to call an ambulance, but I knew it was too late. I'd killed him. A long silence. Linda can be heard sobbing, telling Bruce to stop, that he doesn't need to do this, that he should rest. But Bruce continued. Chen Hao died on that rooftop while we waited for the ambulance that came too late. Died in front of maybe 20 witnesses. Died because of me. Died because I was arrogant and reckless and thought winning mattered more than control. The witnesses, all of them, they protected me. They said it was an accident, a tragic accident during a challenge match. The police investigated, but in 1958, Hong Kong, they didn't care much about kung fu fighters killing each other. Chen Hao's family wanted justice, wanted me charged with murder. But there wasn't enough evidence, just witnesses saying it was accidental. The case was closed. Bruce's voice grew stronger, fueled by the need to confess, to unburden himself after 15 years. That death haunted me every single day since 1958. Every time I taught about control, every time I developed Jeet Kune Do and emphasized precision over power, every time I talked about martial arts being about discipline and responsibility, I was trying to atone for killing Chen Hao. Everything I built, the philosophy, the training methods, the emphasis on control, it all came from guilt, from knowing I'd taken a life through carelessness, from trying to make sure no student of mine ever made the same mistake. The recording captured the sound of medical equipment beginning to alarm. Nurses can be heard entering the room, checking Bruce's vitals, by asking Linda if everything was okay. If you've made it this far in the story, if you're still engaged and learning Bruce Lee's darkest secret, leave a comment below telling me how this confession changes your view of him. Does it make you respect him more or less? Does knowing he killed someone accidentally make him more human or diminish his legacy? I read every comment and want to know what you think. After the nurses left and the room was quiet again, Bruce continued. There's more. Things I've never told anyone except Ip Man, who helped me understand and process what happened. The guilt from Chen Hao's death drove me to America in 1959. Everyone thinks I left Hong Kong because of opportunity, because I wanted to study in America, because I was chasing the American dream. The truth is, I was running from the guilt. Running from Chen Hao's family who looked at me with hatred. Running from the Kung Fu community who knew what I'd done even if they couldn't prove it was more than accident. Ip Man told me before I left, he said, "Bruce, you can run to America, but you can't run from yourself. Use this tragedy to become something better. Don't let Chen Hao's death be meaningless. Make it mean something by never letting it happen again." That's why I developed Jeet Kune Do, not just to improve fighting techniques, but to create a system that emphasized control above all else. That taught students to be efficient, precise, measured. That made sure power was always paired with discipline. Chen Hao died because I had power without control. I spent 15 years making sure no one else died the same way. Bruce paused again, and the sound of his labored breathing filled the recording. But here's the part that torments me most. Here's the confession within the confession. Part of me, a small dark part I've never admitted to anyone, part of me was glad Chen Hao died. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Not glad he was dead, Bruce clarified quickly, but glad that his death proved I was the better fighter. Glad that his death made other fighters afraid to challenge me. Glad that his death built my reputation as someone dangerous, someone to be respected and feared. That realization that I'd taken some pride in a death I caused, that's what really haunts me. That's the demon I've been fighting for 15 years. Every meditation session, every training session where I emphasize control, every conversation about martial arts philosophy. I was fighting that demon, that part of me that took pride in killing. And if you're still watching this confession, if you're hearing things about Bruce Lee that completely change everything you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button one more time, because there's more to this story, more secrets that Bruce revealed in his final hours that the family kept hidden for decades. The recording continued. Linda can be heard asking Bruce if he needs pain medication, if he's in discomfort. He refused, insisted on finishing his confession. "There's one more thing," Bruce said. "The real reason I'm making this recording. The real secret I need to confess before I die." He paused, gathering courage for what came next. "My death isn't an accident. It's not mysterious. I know exactly why I'm dying, and it's connected to Chen Hao. The medical community has theories about why Bruce Lee died at 32. Cerebral edema, brain swelling, allergic reactions to medications. They'll find evidence to support those theories. They'll write medical reports that explain my death in scientific terms, and those reports will be partially true. But they won't tell the whole truth. The truth is, I've been poisoning myself for 5 years. Slowly, deliberately, as penance for Chen Hao's death." The shock in Linda's voice is audible on the recording. She's demanding to know what he means, what he's talking about, insisting that can't be true. Bruce explained calmly, with the clarity of someone who'd made peace with their choice. "In 1968, I started taking increasing doses of substances I knew were harmful, mixed with legitimate supplements and medications so no one would notice. Small amounts, due carefully measured. Not enough to cause obvious immediate harm, but enough to accumulate over years, enough to damage my organs slowly, enough to ensure I wouldn't live to old age. I didn't want to commit suicide. That would hurt my family, damage my legacy. But I also couldn't live with the guilt of what I did to Chen Hao. Couldn't accept that I'd killed a man and faced no real consequences. Couldn't reconcile being celebrated as a martial arts master when I'd violated the most fundamental principle, control. So I chose a slow death, one that would look like medical complications, one that would let me achieve what I needed to achieve, make the films I needed to make, spread the philosophy I needed to spread, and then end. Payment for Chen Hao. Justice delayed, but not denied. Before we continue with what happened after this confession, and I need to ask something. If this story has completely changed your understanding of Bruce Lee, if you're learning secrets that were sealed by his family for 40 years, please share this video. Send it to someone who thinks they know everything about Bruce Lee. Sharing helps preserve the complete truth, not just the legend. Linda is heard on the recording, devastated, angry, demanding to know why Bruce would do this, why he would throw away his life, his family, his future. Bruce's response was quiet but firm, because Chen Hao's family deserved justice, because his students deserved to know their master's death wasn't meaningless, because I couldn't live as a fraud, teaching control while knowing I'd killed through lack of it. This was the only way I could balance the scales. The recording continued for another 12 minutes. When Bruce talked about his children, about his hopes for them, about his wishes for how his philosophy should be taught after his death, he talked about Linda, about how grateful he was for her support, about how sorry he was for the pain his choices would cause. And then, near the end of the recording, Bruce made a specific request. "Linda, this recording stays sealed. Not forever, but for a long time. At least 40 years. Maybe 50. Long enough that everyone connected to Chen Hao has passed. Long enough that the revelation won't destroy lives beyond mine, but eventually it needs to be released. The world deserves to know the truth. That legends are human. That heroes make mistakes. That guilt can drive someone to greatness and to death." The recording ended at 7:23 p.m. on July 20th, 1973. Bruce Lee died approximately 45 minutes later. The official cause of death was listed as cerebral edema, brain swelling from an allergic reaction to a prescription painkiller. Medical examiners found evidence supporting this conclusion. The coroner's report mentioned nothing about self-poisoning, nothing about deliberate slow suicide over 5 years. Linda Lee kept the recording sealed, as Bruce had requested. She told no one except Bruce's brother Robert and their family attorney. The cassette was placed in a safety deposit box with instructions that it should remain sealed until 2023, 50 years after Bruce's death. For 40 years, the world celebrated Bruce Lee as a legend cut down in his prime by tragic medical complications. Books were written analyzing his death. Conspiracy theories flourished. Investigators searched for hidden causes, secret enemies, mysterious circumstances. None of them knew the truth was locked in a safety deposit box, waiting for the specified time to pass. And if you're still engaged with this story, if this confession has completely rewritten what you thought you knew about Bruce Lee's death, hit that like button one more time, because what happened when this recording was finally released created the biggest controversy in martial arts history. In January 2023, exactly 50 years after Bruce's death, the Lee family made an announcement. They possessed an audio recording of Bruce's final confession, made on his deathbed, never before released, containing revelations that would challenge everything the world thought they knew about him. The announcement sparked immediate global interest. Major news organizations demanded access. Historians insisted it should be released. Conspiracy theorists claimed it would prove their theories correct. The Bruce Lee Foundation, after consulting with Linda Lee Cadwell and Bruce's children Shannon and Brandon's estate, made a decision: limited release with full context. The recording would be made available, but accompanied by extensive explanation, historical verification, and commentary from people who'd known Bruce personally. When the recording was finally released in March 2023, the response was unprecedented and divided. Millions listened to Bruce Lee's voice, weak but clear, confessing to killing Chen Hao in 1958, admitting to 15 years of guilt, revealing that his death was self-inflicted penance rather than medical tragedy. The reaction split along clear lines. Some people felt betrayed. The legend they'd believed in for 50 years was built on guilt and hidden death. The man they'd idolized had killed someone and concealed it. The philosophy they'd studied was rooted in atonement for manslaughter. Others felt the confession made Bruce more admirable, that he'd taken responsibility in the only way available to him, that he'd turned tragedy into philosophy, that his death was the ultimate act of integrity, accepting consequences when the legal system hadn't demanded them. The comment sections exploded with debate. This changes everything. Bruce Lee wasn't a hero, he was a killer who got away with it. No, this proves he was more than a hero. He made a terrible mistake and spent his entire life atoning for it. His philosophy, his movies, his teaching, it all came from trying to prevent others from making his mistake. I've studied Bruce Lee for 30 years, and this confession makes me respect him more, not less. It proves he was human, fallible, capable of growth and change. If you've made it this far, if this confession has given you a completely different perspective on Bruce Lee, leave one more comment telling me whether this makes you respect him more or less. Does knowing the truth about Chen Hao's death and Bruce's self-inflicted penance change how you see his legacy? Your comments shape these discussions. Medical experts were consulted about Bruce's claim of self-poisoning. toxicologists reviewed what was known about substances available in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Several confirmed it was theoretically possible to cause cumulative organ damage through careful, measured dosing of certain compounds mixed with legitimate supplements. One that such damage could manifest years later as the kind of cerebral complications that killed Bruce. That it would be nearly impossible to detect in 1973 with available testing technology. Dan Inosanto, one of Bruce's closest students, was interviewed about the recording. "I knew Bruce carried guilt about something," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. He would sometimes talk about a fight in Hong Kong, about how martial arts without control was just violence. I never knew the full story until this recording, but it explains so much about how he taught, why he emphasized discipline and precision above everything else. Linda Lee Cadwell, now in her 70s, spoke publicly about keeping the secret for 50 years. "Bruce made me promise," she explained in a 2023 interview. He was very specific. 50 years. Long enough for everyone connected to Chen Hao to have passed. Long enough that revealing the truth wouldn't destroy innocent lives. It was the hardest secret I've ever kept. There were times I wanted to tell, times when the conspiracy theories about his death became so wild that I wanted to reveal the truth. But I kept my promise. The Chen family was contacted after the recording's release. Chen Hao's grandson, now in his 60s, was interviewed by Hong Kong media. His response was measured and unexpected. "My grandfather died in 1958 when my father was only 10 years old," he said. "Our family knew it was Bruce Lee who caused his death. We knew it was during a challenge match. We were told it was an accident, but we never fully believed that." Hearing Bruce's confession, knowing he carried guilt for 50 years, or knowing his own death was payment for my grandfather's, it brings some closure. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but closure. Understanding that the man who killed my grandfather spent his entire life trying to atone for it. Before we finish this story, I need to ask one final favor. If this confession revealed the complete truth about Bruce Lee, if you learned secrets that were sealed for 50 years, if this changed everything you thought you knew, please share this video one more time. Send it to martial artists, send it to Bruce Lee fans, send it to anyone who needs to understand that legends are built on complicated truth, not simple mythology. The recording became required listening in martial arts philosophy courses worldwide, not because it glorified Bruce Lee, but because it showed the complete picture. A young fighter making a terrible mistake, that mistake causing a death, the guilt from that death driving philosophical development, the philosophy becoming legendary, and the legend ultimately built on tragedy and atonement. Perhaps most remarkably, it fulfilled Bruce Lee's own stated goal in making the recording: to show the world that legends are human, that heroes make mistakes, that martial arts mastery comes not from being perfect, but from learning from imperfection. That responsibility means accepting consequences even when the law doesn't demand it. As Bruce himself said in the final moments of his confession, preserved on the recording for 50 years, "I'm not making this confession to destroy my legacy. I'm making it to complete my legacy. Everything I taught about control, about discipline, not about martial arts being a path to self-understanding, it all came from Chen Hao's death. My students deserve to know that. The world deserves to know that. Not to excuse what I did, but to understand that growth comes from confronting our worst moments, not hiding from them." Hit that subscribe button one final time if you haven't already, because this is exactly why we preserve these stories. Bruce Lee's legacy isn't just about the movies or the philosophy or the cultural impact. It's about the complete truth. The tragic mistake in 1958, the 15 years of guilt, the slow, self-imposed death sentence, the deathbed confession, the 50-year secret, and now the full story available for the world to judge. In the end, the story of Bruce Lee's dying confession isn't really about Chen Hao's death or Bruce's guilt. It's about honesty. About a man who built his entire philosophy on truth, who couldn't die without finally speaking the complete truth, who trusted that the world, given enough time and context, could handle complexity, could understand that someone could make a terrible mistake and spend their life atoning for it, could accept that legends are built on human foundations, not superhuman ones, If that recording device hadn't been running on July 20th, 1973, this secret would have died with Bruce Lee forever. The world would never have known about Chen Hao, never understood the guilt that drove Jeet Kune Do's development, never learned that Bruce's death was self-inflicted penance rather than medical tragedy. But the recording was running. Linda kept her promise. 50 years passed, and now the complete truth is available. When Bruce Lee made his dying confession, he revealed the darkest secret of his life, the accidental killing that haunted him for 15 years, the self-imposed death sentence that ended his life at 32. The recording proves the legend was built on complicated truth, that heroes are human, that mistakes can drive greatness, and that sometimes the most courageous act is simple honesty, even if that honesty has to wait 50 years to be heard.